Hi, today we're talking about mindful pairings, enhancing food and wine together. Now, if you know anything about me at all, you know that this is my sweet spot. This is my favorite thing in the world to do. The reason I got into wine in the first place is that I was at a place in my life where I was starting to have dinner parties. I had done catering. I love to entertain. Our house a lot of times was the place where all the kids would come after band events or football or basketball, soccer, just all of it, whatever it was. So I love to entertain. I love to have people over, but I was ready to kind of elevate things and move from a party in the backyard or just having a few friends over to have some snacks and some wine to actually doing some dinner parties with a nice dinner and a nice bottle of wine. And I wanted to find out how to pair wine. And I had been making my own artisanal cheeses for about a decade by this time while my kids were growing up. And so it was kind of a perfect storm, if you will. My kids were getting older. They didn't need me as much. They were getting ready to leave the home. My husband and I had more disposable income, so we didn't need to, buy $5 and $7 wines from the grocery store anymore. But before we invested a lot of money in wine, we wanted to understand how do we do this? Both my husband and I had been executives and entertained people at dinners with expense accounts. But, for the most part, those experiences were, you knew 3 or 4 labels of certain wines, or the client picked by the price tag on the bottle, or, whatever it was. But even then I found that there wasn't a lot of knowledge about wine. And I tried to get some feedback from folks in the industry, servers, sommeliers, beverage managers, things like that. And there wasn't a lot of help there either. And when I would go out and buy books, because that was always my thing, I was always studying for things, I always wanted to know how things worked. Wine books in a lot of cases are boring because they just give you facts. And what I wanted was an experience. I wanted a knowledge. I wanted a methodology to understand, how do I know a wine is good? Well, how do I pair this with this dinner? How do I know this is going to work? And so what I want to talk about today with Mindful January is how to explore the harmony between wine and food as more of a mindful and even kind of a ritualistic practice. Now, if that sounds a little woo, like, no worries. It's the same thing that we do every day as people coming together and sharing a meal, because when we share a meal together, there's a certain special kind of connection. And I think one of the reasons that we have so many health challenges is not because we're sitting in our offices all day working and sitting in a chair, but also that we rush through our meals. We're not eating as healthy of ingredients coming direct from their source. And so I want to offer up the fact that wine was never intended to be a standalone beverage that a person drank. It never was. It was something that originally the Romans brought over when they were invited to France to help with some pesky marauders who were coming through and stealing land from the Celts in the area. And so the Romans came over and they had red wine. Well, the reason they needed red wine was so they could disinfect the water, because at that time there was nobody watching the quality of the water. And so things got dumped in there, or naturally in nature, things were compromising the quality of the water. And so one of the reasons the Roman soldiers were able to conquer all over the world was basically 2 things. One is they knew how to build roads, so they could move faster. It, of course, took a while to build the road, but once they did that, then they could bring hundreds and thousands of soldiers through that road, down that road. But the second thing is most people didn't go more than a few miles from the place they were born for the entirety of their lives. Well, why not? Well, one, it was not safe. But 2, you had to be able to carry enough that you could eat and drink so that you could get from place to place. Well, the Romans had that. They had red wine. So no matter where they went, no matter what the quality of the water was, they would add a tablespoon of red wine to it, and it became an antimicrobial. And now all of a sudden their water is safe to drink. So there's your history lesson in terms of how the Roman Empire was able to dominate the world. It was red wine. So, coming full circle now, I want to bring you back to the idea that wine was intended as a microbial. It was intended as calories. It was intended to be something that was easy to take with you, that would keep you going during the day, and again, give you calories. Now, it was watered down, so they weren't, getting buzzed along the way. It was really just a liquid meal that was just easier to transport, and did not, because it was fermented, it didn't go bad, or didn't go bad as quickly as, say, a loaf of bread or some other kind of fresh food. So I want to give you the idea of some simple pairing tips and to encourage some intentionality. If you go to my website, you can download my free pocket guide for selecting wines. It looks like this. It prints off on an 8.5 by 11. I just trimmed off the extra. But this is a free item that is a free gift that is on my website, foodwineandflavor.com. And when you download this, it actually lists the 8 noble grapes, 8 noble wines, plus sparkling wines and rosés, which are wine making styles, not grapes themselves. So it includes Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Noir, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Syrah, or Syrah. Syrah is what it's called in France. Shiraz is what it's called in Australia. So on here, it will show you if you chose, say, for example, Chardonnay, and it will say Chardonnay. Chardonnay pairs with seafood, with dairy. It's also great with, say, like creamy pastas, anything buttery. If it's a buttery chard, will go great. So like with lobster and butter sauce, like I said, like creamy pasta, like an Alfredo. It will go with a lot of different cheeses. Chardonnay also pairs well, honestly, with salmon, if it's a nice, hefty, medium-bodied wine. So this will give you lots of ideas of ordinary foods that we have all the time, even to the fact that if you want chips, popcorn, bar food, go with sparkling. If you love vegetables, salads, roasted veg, you're going to want to go with a Pinot Grigio or Sauvignon Blanc. If you want some nice braised, low and slow, all day long red meat, you're going to be down here in the Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon, possibly a Merlot. So grab my free pocket guide and do some pairing with your wine. Don't just drink it on its own. Savor the wine and the food together. Understand the marriage of the food and how wine makes food better and how food makes wine better. I cannot tell you the number of classes that I do, and I will do, especially around the holidays or certain themes. I will have people go through and taste all of the wines, and then I will have them go through and taste the wines a second time with the foods that I have paired. And then even like with the holidays, I'll give them all of the typical holiday flavors, like turkey, ham, pumpkin pie, green bean casserole, some different kinds of desserts or sweets, different things, chocolates. And they will go back through, and the wines that they tasted on their own, that they were kind of like, it's all right, they'll come back and say, that was mind-blowing. They leave my class and they go out and find that wine and buy a few bottles, because they are just hooked now on this flavor combination that I presented for them, because they didn't know that wine is really meant to go with food. They think it's a cocktail, like, a ginger beer or a mojito or a Cosmo. It's not the same thing. It doesn't work the same. You can absolutely pair food and cocktails, don't get me wrong. I'm schooled in that as well. But there is no beverage on the planet that elevates food the way that wine does. And that's not just coming from me. It's a known fact in the culinary world. So I'm really urging you in this video today to go ahead and use my pocket guide to do some basic pairings at home, at restaurants, wherever you're at, but do some thoughtful pairings. And the tip that you need to know about food and wine pairing is that you want to do kind of what I call the sandwich method. You want to take a sip of the wine, a bite of the food, and a sip of the wine. So wine, food, wine. By having wine on the front end, on the back end, it's going to really marry all those flavors together and you'll get the full experience. It will help you turn an ordinary meal, I'm not kidding, into like an aha moment for sure. So I want to encourage you again to join the conversation by, once you've gone out and done some food and wine pairings, please post your mindful wine moments and your personal takeaways on social media. You can use our hashtag mindful with wine. So you want to, actually type in a hashtag mindful with wine, no spaces. And I want to thank you for joining us, because this series is really meant to promote a gentle, inspiring way to start the new year with intentionality and for appreciation of the artistry of wine. I really think that wine can be something other than just going out and drinking. I believe that wine is a way to understand culture. It's a way to understand centuries of tradition. It's a way to understand the concept of a place. I believe that wine can actually be a mindful practice, and I think that it can actually be a way of self-care, to slow down, to breathe, to really enjoy life. As I say on my website, savor the good stuff. So until next time, thank you so much for joining me. Check the show notes for links, and I'd love to see you again. Cheers.